All right, shalom, shalom, shalom. You are live and direct once again with your Akazaki Yahoo, giving all praises, honor, and great esteem unto the Most High Power, Yahuwah Bahashem, Yahushua HaMashiach, and to the 12 tribes of Israel, who were scattered to the four quarters of the earth. I say shalom, wa baruki. That is peace and blessings. And I cannot wait to the day that the Most High brings us back together, and we are once again 12 tribes, one family, one nation, under the Most High Power, under one covenant, back in our own land with a heart of flesh and no more a heart of stone, with our enemies under our feet. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
I'm joined this evening by my most esteemed Kenaniah. Shalom, Aki.
Hey, Shalom, Aki. Shalom, Yasharal. Call Halal Yahweh. Bahashem. Hamashiach. Wa Malak. Yahweh Shah. Barakatah. The water Yahweh. Very happy to be here. Hallelujah. Amazing, Ak.
Hallelujah. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. All praises to Yahweh in the name of his beloved son, Yahweh Shah, the Messiah and King. Bless you. Praise his name. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
Indeed, indeed. It is another Yom Shishi evening, and I'm so thankful, so happy to be here for another opportunity to get into a video review. Praises to the Abba. We're going to get right to it. We have another look to be phenomenal video from our good brothers over at Black Journals. The name of this video is How the Crack Era Changed Black America Forever. So if you are around in the 80s, if you are around in the 90s, you know about crack, and you know how devastating it was to the so-called Black community, and how it adversely affected us in so many negative ways. So we're going to get to this video, and I pray that you're edified in this as much as we are. So here we go.
Police in Kansas City, Missouri are searching this morning for a woman who swapped her infant son for $20 worth of crack cocaine. The 4-month-old boy was turned over to social workers after being left in a bar while his mother smoked crack outside. The crack dealer admits that the baby was part of the transaction.
A devastating epidemic. We just didn't know what to do. We just felt powerless. A parent's worst nightmare, to find my kid not breathing.
In Kansas City, Missouri, police are investigating the shooting death of an 11-year-old boy at a suspected drug house. Frederick Jones had lived in the house up until a month ago. He went back with his sister Saturday night to get some belongings. As he opened the door, he was shot dead. A 14-year-old boy has been arrested, but other children in the neighborhood are still frightened.
I feel sad, and I would stay in the house. I don't want to get shot.
The world is not going right after all.
God might take care of him if he goes up to heaven.
A woman who allegedly smoked crack cocaine just hours before giving birth has been charged with giving the drug to her unborn child. Kimberly Hardy of Muskegon, Michigan, faces charges of second-degree child abuse and delivering cocaine. She could be sentenced to 24 years in prison.
We are racing against time. We have the equivalent of a Boeing 737 crashing every single day.
It's those cravings, the inability to stop.
The truth of the matter is, the crack era was a storm that ravaged Black America. It was more or less a chemical warfare on Black communities, leaving in its wake a trail of devastation, destruction, and despair. This was a time when the very fabric of communities was torn apart, and when the future seemed bleaker than the darkest night. The sound of shattering glass, the stench of smoke, and the cries of the forgotten still echo through the streets of urban America, a haunting reminder of the era's brutal legacy.
When crack came along, it changed everything about the Black community, and it changed everything about America.
Was the sad state merely a product of moral decadence, or was it some sad eventuality that had overtaken the Black communities by some chance? Or was this another psychological ploy born of the intelligence of evil all along against a certain group of people? Come with me, concerned viewers. We will be finding out sooner or later in this video what really is behind this. However, this is the heartbreaking story of how the crack era changed Black America forever. Before we continue, don't forget to support our works by hitting the thumb button, share with friends and families to keep spreading our eye-opening Black narrative, and subscribe to stay tuned in if you are yet to. Let us dive in.
Among the facts you should know, crack is believed to be the most addictive drug known. Estimate, 25 million Americans will have tried some form of cocaine by their mid-20s. 1/3 of all college students will have tried it before they graduate. 5,000 more Americans are trying cocaine each day.
Numerous African-American families have struggled for generations with persistent poverty, especially in the inner city. These conditions were further strained during the 1980s and 1990s by the widespread use of crack cocaine. For many, crack use became an obsession, dominated their lives, and superseded family responsibilities. This behavior placed additional pressure on already stressed kin support networks. Children born to members of the crack generation were properly educated on the need to avoid the usage of crack with the Just Say No campaigns.
In the early 1980s, the nation's slogan was clear: just say no.
The campaign considers initiatives from both a social problem and a strengths perspective that could help these families and help themselves to advance their economic circumstances.
Tonight, CBS News takes you on the streets to the war zone for an unusual 2 hours of hands-on horror. Our focus is on crack, a kind of cocaine, a powerful mind bender and increasingly popular and deadly. We call our broadcast 48 Hours on Crack Street.
It's not going to have to be around here.
All right, but I mean, you can get it.
I can get the good crack.
You just saw the man try to sell me crack right out in the middle of the street. The camera wasn't even hidden during that sequence. Had to have seen the camera, it was right here. And there just doesn't appear to be any fear of consequence.
It's 5 o'clock on Wall Street on a Friday afternoon. The business day is ended. The stock exchange is closed. People are going home. They're going away for the weekend. But business on the street hasn't ended. It's just beginning.
Right here.
Who's dying?
The crack epidemic was known to have particularly devastating effects within the African American communities of the inner cities by causing the increase of addictions, deaths, and drug-related crimes. The idea of the drug called crack came about when cocaine dealers were faced with the problem of dropping prices for their illegal product, so they made a decision to convert the powder to crack, a solid smokable form of cocaine that could be sold in smaller quantities to more people.
How many of the parties you go to do you see?
Every party.
Almost every
party unless there's drugs or drinking. It's not a party. People won't go.
Unlike powder cocaine, the result of this preparation was easier to develop, more cost-efficient to produce, and cheaper to buy, which made it all the more economically accessible to a more predominant population.
A lot of people sell crack. The thing is to own crack and have people sell it for you. You gotta save up while you sell for someone else. You gotta think things out for yourself. That's like a gift to me. That's what I can do. Think and figure.
It doesn't even take a kid with a gift, even though this kid thinks he's got a gift. He doesn't have a gift. The gift that he's got is he's got the easiest item to peddle. He's got crack.
A small-time drug dealer who sold crack daily earned a median net income of $2,000 per month. This served as a source of income to the households of most African Americans. And why? This is the answer. The selling of crack cocaine was not exclusively prevalent in African American communities, but it did have a disproportionate impact on these communities in the 1980s and 1990s. There are several historical and systemic factors that contributed to this. 1, systemic racism and segregation. African Americans were often relegated to low-income, marginalized neighborhoods with limited economic opportunities, making them more vulnerable to the illegal drug trade. 2, targeted marketing. Crack cocaine was often marketed specifically to African American communities. with dealers targeting these areas due to perceived demand and lack of law enforcement. 3. Socioeconomic factors. African American communities faced higher levels of poverty, unemployment, and lack of access to health care, making them more susceptible to drug abuse. 4. Racial bias in law enforcement. Existing racial biases in the legal system and law enforcement exacerbated the impact of the crack epidemic on African Americans. Law enforcement efforts often focus disproportionately on African American communities, leading to higher arrest and incarceration rates for drug-related offenses. 5. Legacy of discrimination. Historical discrimination in areas like housing, education, and employment contributed to the socioeconomic disparities that made African American communities more vulnerable to the crack epidemic. In the 1980s, the streets of urban America were a harsh teacher for many young Black kids. For some, the allure of easy money and a sense of belonging led them down a dangerous path. There are several real-life stories and documentaries that offers a glimpse into the complexities and challenges faced by Black families who got involved in the crack trade at a young age. Here are a few major examples. 1. Freeway, Rick Ross.
Hey, you guys come up for a second. You know, I know I had an opportunity to kind of share with you guys, you know, where I came from and where I grew up. And then, you know, a lot of guys right now, they make a whole lot of money rapping off of some of the stuff that I used to do as a kid. They call him Rick Ross. Well, if you ain't never seen the real Rick Ross, who just did 21 years in a federal prison before you guys were born, that's him in the flesh right here.
Well, you know how they say that everybody has a purpose in life? Well, at one time I felt that selling cocaine was my purpose. I used to think that I was born to be a drug dealer. I felt it was my job to keep everybody high and to get as many people high as I could.
That's Freeway Rick Ross himself talking there. A well-known figure in the crack epidemic, Ross started dealing at 19 and became one of the most successful dealers in Los Angeles. Lack of proper welfare and extreme poverty were his major motivations, of course.
When you're a kid, you can recognize forms of struggle. You know when the refrigerator is empty, when there's no milk, no cereal. So, you know, when I was a kid, I vowed that I was gonna take care of my mom. My mom was my world. You know, she took care of me. It was me, her, and my brother David.
His story was featured in the documentary Freeway, Crack in the System, 2015. It was a groundbreaking revelation, hearing the things Rick said.
My first thing I gotta ask you, man, is how real can we get with the conversation like this? Because I know you were dealing with some heavy government cats.
I had some sources that was unknown to me that was in the White House. You know, guys like Ronald Reagan, George Bush Sr., Oliver North.
There have been startling accusations that the United States government itself may have actually helped bring drugs into this country.
And in Los Angeles, a drug dealer known as Freeway Ricky Ross was in the middle of it.
A drug ring in the Bay Area had been selling cocaine, and part of the money was going to Central America to buy weapons, and the drugs were being sold in the ghettos of Los Angeles to the Crips and the Bloods, who were turning it into crack.
That's really how the cocaine and crack epidemic got sparked in America.
Wow, man. You got a deep story, homie.
When Rick Ross got out of prison after doing 21 years of jail time, he came out a changed man. He had begun holding platforms, events, and talk shows, which he would use as a venue to orient the younger generations on why they should never do anything with drugs.
Freeway Rick Ross.
How y'all doing? I know what it was like when I was growing up. You know, sometimes we do things without even knowing why we did it or what we're doing. We don't even give thought to it. We just go. The homies win, so I win. See, I went through that. And when you're feeling like that, that can allow you to sell drugs. The big homies told me that's what I should be doing. Homie, you shouldn't be playing tennis. That's for sissies. This is what you need to be doing. Yeah, I made a lot of money. I made more money than I thought I could spend. But they didn't tell me I was gonna do 20 years in prison. He didn't tell me I was gonna be away from my family. My kids was gonna grow up without their father. See, I didn't know about all that. I didn't know in order for me to drive a big car with big wheels on it, that somebody else's kid had to go hungry. When I really started to think and use my head, see, because I was illiterate until I was 28 years old. I had never read a book, had never tried to read a book. See, in my neighborhood, it wasn't cool to read.
Ross had said that when he first saw crack cocaine as a teenager in 1979, he did not immediately believe it was a drug because it looked different from other drugs he had seen.
When I started, we were happy to make $20 or $30 a week. Then probably the next week we might do 100 a week, and then a couple weeks later 200 a week, then 300 a week, then 300 a day. I learned how to addict the sellers. If they make so much money, then they're gonna go buy things.
The nickname Freeway came from Ross owning properties along Los Angeles Interstate 110, also known as the Harbor Freeway. According to an October 2013 Esquire magazine article, between 1982 and 1908, federal prosecutors estimated Ross bought and resold several metric tons of cocaine, with Ross's gross revenue claimed to be more than $900 million, equivalent to $2.7 billion in 2023, and profits of almost $300 million, $10 million in 2023.
My life is a mirror of America. You know, when you talk about illiteracy, schools not functioning, drugs, prison, you know, I have actually lived the American dream, and I guess that's why so many people relate to my story.
During the height of his drug dealing, Ross was said to have sold $3 million in one day. According to the Oakland Tribune, in the course of his rise, prosecutors estimate that Ross exported several tons of cocaine to New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and elsewhere, and made more than $500 million between 1983 and 1984. Another good example to learn from is 2, Richard Kane Jones' story. Jones's memoir, Kane's Story, A Life on the Streets, 2011, details his experiences as a young dealer in the Bronx during the crack era. Growing up in the Bronx, Richard Kane Jones knew poverty and violence all too well. His mother struggled to make ends meet, and his father was absent. The streets became his refuge, but also his downfall. At just 15, Richard started selling crack to support his family after his mother's passing. He saw it as the only way to survive and provide for his loved ones. As he delved deeper into the drug trade, Richard earned the nickname Kane for his ruthless tactics. He built a reputation, made money, and gained respect in the streets. But with success came violence, trauma, and constant looking over his shoulder. He witnessed friends and acquaintances get shot, stabbed, or arrested. The police were a constant presence, and Richard experienced their brutality firsthand. Despite the dangers, Richard couldn't escape the cycle. He was arrested multiple times, spending periods in jail and prison. The harsh sentencing and racial bias in the criminal justice system only added to his frustration. In prison, Richard struggled with addiction, anxiety, and depression. He felt trapped with no clear way out. One day, Richard realized he had a choice: continue down the path of destruction or seek help. He began writing his story, pouring his emotions onto paper. The process was therapeutic, allowing him to confront his demons and find a new purpose. Richard eventually left the drug trade, dedicating his life to advocacy and sharing his experiences with others. Through his memoir, Kane's Story, A Life on the Streets, Richard hopes to reach those still trapped in the cycle of poverty, violence, and addiction. He wants his story to serve as a cautionary tale, highlighting the need for community support, education, and alternatives to the drug trade. Richard's journey is a testament to the human capacity for resilience, redemption, and growth. The regime of the U.S. ex-president, Ronald Reagan, was so redolent with crack activities that Reagan had to come up with the strategy, war on drugs. The aforementioned strategy combated drug trafficking and aimed to end the crack cocaine epidemic, destroying the lives of many at the time. Over the years, the drug has been tested to have highly addictive euphoria, which makes its victims unaware of their acts while in that state.
Police in Kansas City, Missouri are searching this morning for a woman who swapped her infant son for $20 worth of crack cocaine.
Crack cocaine was noted for its instantaneous and intense high, which kept users craving more, thus causing an upsurge in crack cocaine addictions.
87 Salah Rock, Lotto's in the Gumby, Tri-Borough, fly nigga, rap for glaciers, do it for CeeLo games, cases, battle for bitches, $1 million.
Due to these addictions, people did so many insane things in exchange for cracks, while the suppliers did anything to keep their sale points sailing.
Police in Kansas City, Missouri are searching this morning for a woman who swapped her infant son for $20 worth of crack cocaine.
A 30-year-old woman, Susan Barber, was sentenced for turning her 13-year-old daughter over to a man to be raped in return for a supply of crack.
The increase in the demand for crack cocaine caused intense competition between drug dealers as they fought to profit from the same customers. Consequently, violence became linked to crack cocaine as these small-time drug dealers defended their economic boundaries. This would usually involve violent fights that can be so intense that communities, towns, cities, and states would be greatly shaken by it, thereby inviting the attention of the government. Between 1982 and 1985, the number of cocaine users increased by 1.6 million people. The government made several efforts to decrease the outraging number of cocaine users. The efforts included the passing of federal anti-drug laws, increased federal anti-drug funding, initiation and expansion of prison and police programs, and the establishment of private organizations, such as Partnership for a Drug-Free America, to campaign on its behalf. The war on drugs strategy led to a high rate of mass incarceration on various Black Americans, including guilty and innocent ones. After the declaration of the war on drugs in 1982, prison populations tripled in just a few years. The rapid growth in prison populations was particularly obvious in federal institutions. Although the overall federal prison population was only 24,000 in 1980, by 1996, it had reached 106,000. The federal prison population continued to grow in the 1990s, and in 2000, the federal prison population exceeded 145,000. 57% of the federal prisoners in 2000 were incarcerated for drug offenses, and in 1982, there were approximately 400,000 incarcerated persons. By 1992, that number had more than doubled to 850,000. From 1979 to 1989, the percentage of African Americans arrested for drug offenses doubled from 22% to about 42% in total. During that same period, the total number of African American arrests for drug abuse violations skyrocketed from 112,748 to 452,574, a shocking increase of over 300%. The war on drugs resulted in an immense growth in court caseloads and the prison population. The war on drugs law focused on small-time drug dealers who were generally poor, young Black males from the inner city. Ultimately, the prison population doubled due to the massive arrest of drug dealers and their customers. 1 in every 4 African American males aged 20 to 29 was either incarcerated or on probation or parole by 1989, which contributed to the United States having the highest incarceration rate in the world. By 1995, that statistic had increased to nearly 1 in 3. Jerome Miller, an American social worker, analyzed arrest statistics from several American cities to determine the impact of the war on drugs on policing. He found striking racial disparities on how drug arrests were made.
I will tell you, Director Deutsch, as a former Los Angeles Police narcotics detective, that the agency has dealt drugs throughout this country for a long time.
For decades, the American government have been accused severally for flooding the streets with hard drugs, just so they could place Blacks behind bars.
For decades, the American government has been accused of intentionally flooding the streets with hard drugs. The CIA and law enforcement have supposedly been funneling drugs into the inner cities and to the African American community in particular, as part of a covert effort to stop them attaining stability, building wealth, and achieving political power.
In many jurisdictions, African American men accounted for over 80% of total drug arrests. In Baltimore, for example, African American men were 86% of those arrested for drug offenses in 1991. The fact that African Americans are incarcerated in such large percentages and are arrested and incarcerated at such disproportionate rates is beyond shocking. It is obscene in the absence of a strong showing that African Americans are responsible for a comparable percentage of crime in the United States. According to mass communication scholar William Elwood, Reagan's rhetorical declaration of a war on drugs had a deliberate political effect. In Elwood's view,
such rhetoric allows presidents to appear as strong leaders who are tough on crime and concerned about domestic issues, and is strategically ambiguous to portray urban minorities as responsible for problems related to the drug war and for resolving such problems.
Thus, the origins of the drug war can be traced to shifting public attitudes toward drugs in the early 1980s. Additionally, reporters Robert Parry and Brian Barger shared a shocking story in 1985, where they claimed Nicaraguan rebels were involved in cocaine trafficking. And not only did the CIA know about these activities, but they allowed them to continue in order to help fund the Contras war front.
It's easy to understand how people of color may not believe the US authorities have their best interests at heart. But do these particular drug charges stick? Did the intelligence agencies actually play a role in flooding American cities with cocaine? The story of the CIA and crack cocaine doesn't actually begin on the streets of LA or Miami. It begins in the jungles of Central America. In 1979, the dictatorial government of Nicaragua was overthrown by socialist revolutionaries called the Sandinistas. In response, right-wing groups known as the Contras began a brutal paramilitary campaign, receiving money and weapons from the CIA as part of the Cold War struggle against the Soviet Union.
If we cut off the freedom fighters, we will be giving the Soviets a free hand in Central America, handing them one of their greatest foreign policy victories since World War II.
But in 1982, Democrats in Congress passed laws to cut off support for the Nicaraguan rebels. So the Contras and their CIA backers had to find new ways of funding their struggle. What they found was cocaine. The Contras were soon linked with Colombian cartels, and in 1985, reporters Robert Parry and Brian Barger broke an almost unbelievable story. They claimed Nicaraguan rebels were involved in cocaine trafficking, and that not only did the CIA know about these activities, they allowed them to continue in order to help fund the Contras war effort.
When Bob Perry and Brian Barger got a hold of a CIA report revealing that they were working in the mid-1980s with Contras fighting the Sandinista government, they were warned by their editors that this was not something that was going to make the people that own their newspapers very happy, and most of them ended up losing their jobs.
However, the clandestinity of these criminal masterminds would lead to even darker agendas for some cover-ups. This would be the mass incarceration of African American communities in epic proportions. Here's what an ex-officer said.
I'm a former undercover narcotics detective for a multi-jurisdictional federal task force. I'll say firsthand that the drug war is and always has been a total failure and was never meant to stop drugs. We have an addiction problem, and you can't arrest your way out of that. One of my biggest assignments was busting the pill mills in the early 2000s. We succeeded in busting those DRS, but what we really did was open the door for heroin to make a huge aggressive comeback. And the heroin has led to fent. It's time to change the way we look at things. I appreciate Mr. Rick Ross for telling his story. It, along with several other stories of young men looking for a way out, helped me change my perspective. After several years and countless arrests leading to countless years of incarceration, I didn't stop a damn thing. I only made it worse. I do not have the answers, but I know that what we are doing and have been doing isn't working, and never will.
Thus said the ex-officer. Going forward, in this dark era, not only were large numbers of African Americans incarcerated, African Americans were incarcerated at percentages that exceeded any legitimate law enforcement interest, which negatively impacted the African American community a great deal. While African Americans would only comprise 12% of the U.S. population, there are 46% of those who would be incarcerated in the state and federal prisons. The bloody outcome was heartbreaking. At the end of the year 1999, over 500,000 black men and women would be held in state and federal prisons. A disparity this great appears inexcusable on its face. The claim that African Americans violate the drug laws at a greater rate and that this justifies the great disparities in rates of arrest and incarceration seems unlikely. This is why most drug arrests are made for the crime of possession. Possession is a crime that every drug user must commit, and in the United States, most drug users are white. The U.S. Public Health Service Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration reported in 1992 that 76% of drug users in the United States were white, 14% were African American, and 8% were Hispanic. Cocaine users were estimated to be 66% white, 17.6% black, and 15.9% Hispanic. From this data, it could be seen that there's insufficient evidence to conclude that African Americans are more likely to deal drugs and thus more likely to be arrested. On the other hand, there are logical reasons to conclude that the number of African American dealers may be disproportionately large. Michael Tonry, a famous American criminologist, argues that it is easier for police to make arrests in socially disorganized neighborhoods because drug dealing is more likely to occur on the streets and transient drug buyers are less likely to draw attention to themselves. These neighborhoods became homes to most African Americans after a massive wave of them migrated to cities in pursuit of industrial jobs after World War I. They were then forced into a few increasingly crowded, dilapidated neighborhoods through violence, restrictive covenants, and discriminatory practices by real estate agents. Meanwhile, white families were moving to segregated suburban areas, especially following World War II. The difference in crack and powder cocaine sentencing is significant because African Americans are more likely to use crack, while white drug users are more likely to use powder cocaine. Since the passage of the Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986, which first enacted the crack powder sentencing disparity, virtually all federal cocaine prosecutions have been against African Americans charged with the possession or sale of crack cocaine. Although the disproportionate racial impact of the Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986 has been noted by the U.S. Sentencing Commission, neither Congress nor the executive branch has moved to rectify the disparities in the law. The combination with the fact that African Americans in general usually get longer sentences than comparably situated whites meant that drug war sentencing has been particularly unkind to African Americans. This era greatly ravaged Black American communities, leaving deep scars that still linger. Crack cocaine's availability and affordability led to widespread addiction, shattering families and lives. Mothers struggling with addiction lost custody of their children, perpetuating cycles of foster care and generational trauma. Fathers incarcerated for crack-related offenses left behind a generation of fatherless children, exacerbating poverty and social inequality. Children growing up in crack-infested neighborhoods faced constant violence, poverty, abuse, and instability, hindering their ability to thrive. These kids had become terribly victimized by the surrounding situation they found themselves in.
Fresh evidence, if any, is needed of just how vicious the nation's drug plague is. Police in Texas videotaped someone selling crack cocaine who's barely old enough to spell it. James Hattori has the story and the pictures of the cocaine kid.
Houston police were shocked when a 3-year-old girl approached an undercover officer at a suspected drug house Tuesday, then proceeded to sell him 2 dime rocks of crack cocaine. The officer, who asked that we not show his face, says the little girl was acting as a go-between.
I told her 2 dimes. The mother had the little girl put the dope in the little girl's hand, and the little girl came over and brought me the dope.
I don't know how she had it in her hand, but we was over there playing domino, and there wasn't nobody selling drugs.
Police arrested the girl's 58-year-old grandmother and 22-year-old mother. They took 4 children into protective custody. Drugs are apparently a family affair. The little girl's father is in prison for dealing, and she told police her grandmother kept the stash.
Rock.
That's rock?
Hey, grandma.
The grandma? You know what grandma does with them? What she do with them?
Keep them in her bag.
She keeps them in her bag? They all be coming? They give her money for them?
We're outraged, we're infuriated that this situation exists. That someone involved in the drug trafficking would utilize a small child.
Police seized 6 handguns, 40 rocks of cocaine, and $1,000, enough to file charges today against the mother and grandmother. Without that evidence, police say their prime suspect would have been a 3-year-old girl whose only crime was minding her mother.
A boy is in critical condition in a New York City hospital this morning with burns over half his body after a drug-related attack. Police say David Opont was on his way to school in Brooklyn when he was dragged off by another boy. He was beaten, bound, and set on fire after he refused to smoke crack. A 13-year-old boy has been arrested and charged with attempted murder. Today is David's 12th birthday.
Children were often placed in foster care, frequently outside of their own communities, leading to further disruption and trauma.
There was been plenty of times I've packed my bags and ready to leave, but I never left. I had younger brothers and sisters that I couldn't leave because my mom was never around to take care of them. And when she was mostly with her friends if she was home, or she was sleeping most of the time.
Also, most kids were affected with varieties of diseases from birth as a result of constant usage of hard drugs by nursing and pregnant mothers.
A woman who allegedly smoked crack cocaine just hours before giving birth has been charged with giving the drug to her unborn child.
Many of these kids became vulnerable to addiction, incarceration, or human trafficking.
A 13-year-old boy has been arrested and charged with attempted murder. Today is David's 12th birthday.
The act of addiction and substance abuse ravaged lives, as crack's highly addictive nature also led to widespread abuse. This, in turn, caused a surge in health problems, including increased rates of HIV and AIDS, tuberculosis, and other diseases spread rapidly among users. The epidemic also had a profound impact on popular culture, with crack's influence evident in music, film, and literature. In the aftermath of the crack epidemic, the United States was left to grapple with the consequences of its own failed policies and systemic injustices. The country was forced to confront the need for criminal justice reform, increased funding for social services, and a more compassionate approach to addressing addiction and substance abuse. And although the crack epidemic has receded, its impact remains, serving as a stark reminder of the need for continued vigilance and action to address the complex social and economic issues that fuel drug use and addiction. Although the crack era may be over, its impact on Black Americans will be felt for generations to come. The devastating effects of addiction, mass incarceration, and family separation have left an indelible mark on communities of color. The crack era's legacy still continues to cast a long shadow over the lives of individuals today. For many, the trauma and pain of that time remain a constant companion, a reminder of the fragility of hope and the resilience of the human spirit. The memories of violence, addiction, and family disintegration still linger, etched in the minds of those who witnessed it firsthand. The emotional scars of that era have become a part of their DNA, shaping their relationships, their choices, and their worldview. For some, the crack era's impact is felt in the ongoing struggle with addiction, a constant battle to overcome the demons that were unleashed during that time. While others would grapple with the intergenerational trauma, the echoes of pain and suffering that have been passed down through generations, with family dynamics still remaining complicated, with relationships still strained from the era's devastating effects. The absence of parents, the broken homes, and the shattered trust continue to reverberate, making it difficult for individuals to form healthy connections with others. The economic struggles of the crack era also persist, with many individuals and communities still facing poverty, unemployment, and financial instability. The American dream seems elusive, a distant memory of a time when hope and opportunity were within reach. Mental health issues such as depression, anxiety, and suicidal thoughts continue to plague individuals and communities, a testament to the era's enduring impact. The social and community fabric remains frayed, with trust and cohesion still in short supply. Yet even in the midst of such challenges, there is a glimmer of hope. Individuals are finding ways to heal, to rebuild, and to rediscover their sense of purpose. As of today, communities are coming together, determined to break the cycles of trauma and pain. The crack era may have forever changed the lives of individuals, but it will not define their destiny. The era's legacy serves as a stark reminder of the destructive power of systemic racism and the importance of addressing the root causes of social inequality. As we move forward, it's crucial that we learn from the lessons of the past and work towards a future where every individual has access to the resources and opportunities they deserve. Truly, the crack era may have changed Black Americans forever, but it's up to us to shape a brighter future. That brings us to the end of yet another mind-moving video.
Wow. And You know, that's never just an easy 2 or 3 words to say about such a traumatic historical situation such as that. And here's the sad news. It's not over.
Right.
You know, they still out there smoking crack. They still out there selling crack. They still out there getting high. And they still out there selling their children and doing all manner of crazy and wicked things. So it's certainly far from over. Now, is it as widespread? Is it as it was back then? No, it's not the same as it was back then, but it's definitely not over. So, but as far as the video, my goodness, heartbreaking to say the least, and traumatic, very traumatic, very sad to see these things that took place. People selling their children, people,
Right.
Just whatever they'll do for a hit of these drugs, and it is outrageous and egregious. Even all these years later, it's still as hurtful then, as hurtful now it was then. And I praise the Most High for his word, his laws, and his statutes and his commandments to put in proper perspective why we don't deal with these things, why getting high is not an option for us, why smoking and even drinking excessively is not an option for us, because the Abba commands more of us than that, and has made us greater than that. So all praises to the Abba for that reason, and I'll yield there. Go ahead, Ak.
Karnak, you're right. It's still a problem. Anytime we have individuals that waste their life away on nothing, it's a problem. It's kind of hits home, for me. I don't know about you, but I know many of us, so-called Negroes, have family members that have struggled with the addiction of crack cocaine. Many of us have family members that have done time in prison for selling cocaine, and my family is not exempt from that. It's truly a sickness, because I had a uncle. He you meet him, you're gonna automatically love him. You're gonna love him. Just a real good dude, but fighting those demons are, and it had gotten so bad to where he was trying to rob people, and the people in the neighborhood and the gas station, they knew who he was. They knew he didn't have a weapon. So what they did, they took a mallet and smashed his hands, so he can't even close, make a fist anymore, but it's also messed up his work, because he was a functioning, he still went to work, Now we would hear stories about him dropping my aunt off at church on the first day of the week, and then he'd say he going to park the car, she wouldn't see him again until the following first day of the week, so it's just a sickness. And if it were to disappear today, we would still be in the rebuilding process, because we still have brothers and sisters that are locked up for selling what was flooded in our communities. We still have children who were ripped away from their parents, who are dealing with that trauma, which is probably affected their relationships with other people in life. You know, so these are all byproducts of the crack epidemic that was placed in our community. We've covered videos about how they destroyed our thriving cities. Now we're hearing about, you know, and this is, you know, something that we were aware of, but, you know, I'm glad that we have the opportunity to cover it.
Right.
But, you know, you inflood our communities with crack, cocaine, and, you know, make our living conditions deplorable.
Right.
You know, send our young men to prison with hardened criminals at the age of 16, 17, 18, 19 years old, where they're just there doing 2 to 5. They're in prison. They become better criminals, you know, or more devious criminals, and you put them back into the community with the people, and, you know, it has byproducts of, you know, of that as well. You know, we see a lot of violence, and this is all part of captivity, right?
Yeah. Systemic.
All part of.
Yeah, it's a system. It's a set up system to just, you know, just relegate our people to the bottom of society, and that was the ploy from the gate. So, you know, it's absolutely crazy, and by no means don't think that we don't accept responsibility, because we do. You know, we had to, because this was our reality. This is the reality in the Black community, that these were the things that we had to deal with. So responsibility goes without saying.
Yeah, indeed. It's and you don't get to pass out a, you know, in my book, and, you know, I can't judge an individual, but I can judge a situation. You know, to me, it's very faulty to think that you can destroy a community 362 days out of the year, and then 3 days out of the year you pass out turkeys and you feel like that's okay.
Right.
But, you know, you ask some of these cats, you know, how they look back, you know, on their actions, and, you know, Frank Lucas will tell you that he feels like he did all right for a little country boy. These are his words, not my words. This is what he said, you know. You know, but you know, we read in the scripture of Joseph's brothers putting him in bondage, you know, where selling him off, and where he goes into bondage. We know that our people placed one another in bondage in a Kebulon and sent us over to this hemisphere. Once we're here in this hemisphere, when our communities are no longer thriving and hope seems to be lost, we start placing one another in bondage with drugs. So all praises to the Most High that we're approaching a time out where the little children won't have to live in fear of their communities and what's going on in them, you know. And righteousness will be restored, and individuals who played a part in this, you won't get away with this.
Won't get away. You will not get away. You will not get away. So that's the paramount thing, because, you know, it's one thing to do such evil to a people. It's a whole other situation to think you get away with it. You know, it's one thing to do evil. It's another thing to think you get away with doing evil. Because when you think you get away with it, you just content, you sleep well, and everything is fine. But you're not getting away. Hamashiach not having it. He coming back for a purpose. And it's not so you can get away. So we know that time is coming. So
by Hashem Hamashiach Yahweh Shai.
Indeed, by Hashem. In the name of the Messiah, Yahweh Shai, who you may ridiculously somehow formulate to the JC name. No, he's coming back, and he's not coming back to play cards and sip tea and make everything all right. He gonna make everything all right, but for the people that's been mistreated. So all right, we're gonna go ahead and close out here. Man, all praises to the Abba for another great video. Shout out to Black Journalists for the great work that they do on these videos, putting these together for us to review. Man, it's hard though. It's hard because the reality is heavy and it's difficult. But we have to be aware of these things so that we don't get caught up in these things again. Because there was a video we shared a couple of months ago where they was talking about them trying to bring back Colombian crack from Colombia.
Yeah,
and they said it was Colombian crack. That's how they named it, Colombian crack. We're gonna bring back Colombian crack. So, but they won't get away. You're not getting away. So, let's conclude with the book of Ecclesiastes, as we always do, chapter number 12, verse number 13. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear the Most High and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. It is so very important that we understand that in the conclusion of the whole matter, we are to fear the Most High and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. At the end of the day, when it is all said and done, all the dust is settled and all the smoke is cleared. As much as we have been through and as much turmoil as we have endured, judgment will solely contend on whether we have feared the Most High and kept his commandments, because this is the whole duty of man. I am your Akazaki Yahoo, joined by my most esteemed Akinanaya, giving all praises, honor, and great esteem unto the Most High Power, Yahuwah Bahashem, Yahushua HaMashiach, and to the 12 tribes of Israel who are scattered to the four quarters of the earth. I say Shalom, Wa Baruchi. That is peace and blessings. And I cannot wait to the day that the Most High brings us back together and we are once again 12 tribes, one family, one nation, under the Most High Power, under one covenant, back in our own land with a heart of flesh and no more a heart of stone, with our enemies under our feet. Until that day come, Shalom, Israel.
Shalom, Mr. Ka.
All praises to the Abba. Praise you, Abba. Hallelujah.